Hello and welcome to our Nextland series for the PCI DSS. If I'm not mistaken, this is the 10th one that we are doing, and today's topic is something really interesting that you've taken that we get queried upon the most, which is the scoping and segmentation. And I've given it a nice catchphrase over there that less is more. And in today's session, we'll be getting into what do I mean by that? What do you mean by less is more, which almost seems paradoxical in nature. So starting off again, before I start, thank you so very much for turning up, and the numbers are increasing. I thank you for the good word of the mouth that has been going around on this webinar, and you've seen people logging in from all parts of the globe. This webinar is being held in three separate time zones. One is India, then UK, and the US. So thank you again for being there. Starting off, okay, a quick about me. Okay, you must have read about it, but okay, this is me, Narendra Sahu, to put a face to the voice. And I have my own company, Vista InfoSec. I've been working for close to 25 years, and I've done my QSA, CSSP, CISA, CRS. Beyond that, I've been working basically in the information security field for almost like 20 years now. Going ahead, okay, this is the agenda for the day. First, why is PCI DSS such a hot topic nowadays? Uh, in any sort of PCI engagement, that's the first thing that's getting discussed and argued about. Hopefully, that is. And then we get into understanding the basics of scoping and segmentation. We'll look into the various categories for scope definitions. Segmentation will look into some misconceptions and provide the clarifications and the top tips for PCI DSS. And what I earnestly request you is that in your GoToWebinar screen, you have this questions segment. You can always click on it and drop me a question. If it is relevant to that part, I will cover it. Otherwise, I'll always write back to you and I assure you, I reply to each and every question or comment that comes in. So please feel free. So here we go. To get the terminology straight, CDE refers to the card data environment. Please keep this definitions with you because I cannot keep on elaborating on every slide. The second is the card holder data. That is actually the data that needs to be protected under PCI DSS. SAD would be the sensitive authentication data. We'll look into that, what that means. And finally, the account data. These are all different words that we'll be using, which includes cardholder data and or sensitive authentication data. It is different, and we'll get into what the different means. So first thing first, why is it a hot topic? Because first thing, there are many interpretations of what is meant by adequate network segmentation, and the point is not all of them are accurate enough. The number one problem that I see, in my opinion, is that the people who are doing the consulting or the people who are doing um, the certification, that is the QSAs, are not technically qualified. They may be good people and they may have done the studies and I'm sure they've passed the exam, otherwise they wouldn't have been a QSA. But the point is, you need to have a very solid understanding of how networks work before trying to understand what is an adequate network segmentation and whether that is good enough. And most of the people that I've seen don't understand that, because either you are a very good auditor or you're a very good techie guy. Very rare to have a combination of that. So if you are getting into PCI DSS, ask your network guy and your security guy to do a very good analysis of that, and then work with a QSA and very diligently, if I may say that, is that interview your QSA. What has been the IT background of the QSA to be able to judge your network segmentation? Because understand, an audit is always a point in time, and unfortunately, if you get audited and then if you get hacked, unfortunately, the QSA will always squirm away from it. by saying that, okay, this is not what was shown to me at the time of the audit, and that is, you changed the setup after he went and stuff like that, and he will get away. Think about it. There have been many hacks of the you know customer infrastructure, or these payment gateways or merchants. How many times have you seen the name of the QSA highlighted? Never. Like, even in India, you see so many, and I'm aware of so many payment gateways hacked, or like even in the Hitachi hack and stuff like that. How many times did you ever hear the QSA bought to book, or laid out in the open? It doesn't happen. So finally, it is up to you. If you value your enterprise, if you value your business, if you are respecting your clients, you owe it to them to get a good QSA. Many do not understand networking. They understand the PCI requirements. Okay, it needs segmentation, it needs this, it needs that. They'll be able to talk about the sections in their sleep, but that doesn't make them competent to evaluate a network setup. Now, there are many motivations to reduce the scope. Now, we will. One of the major misconceptions is that um, scoping and segmentation requires an air gap, that is a physical separation of actual networks between the cardholder data environment and your out of scope environment, which is not the case. We'll get into it. But many a time, in the zeal to reduce scope, you may come up with quick fix measures, or just measures which can please the auditor, but is not really maintainable in the long term. So these are not all the motivations are in the basic interest of security. It could be just in the interest of saving money, which may not be the right way to go ahead. Now, improper scoping choices are contributing to compromising. Most of the hacks that you see nowadays of card data is attributed, or can be attributed, to improper scoping and improper segmentation. Scoping feeds into segmentation. So you cannot have one without the other. If you're scoping, that you use the scoping statement, you use the scope to identify how the network will be segmented. So that's how it moves. Now, so cardholder data is still a very desirable target. So with bad interpretations and or motivations, it can lead to very aggressive or accidental underscoping. This I've seen so many times. Like our company, since 2007 or 2008, since PCI DSS 1.2 was released, I have been into PCI DSS consulting. And whenever we are called into an audit also of PCI DSS, this is what we find as the major issue, that is underscoping. Ineffective segmentation control. Just having a firewall in place doesn't mean that your networks are segmented. And this can have disastrous consequences. If you have a good QSA, he will stop the audit, because then the entire PCI doesn't make sense. Or it can also lead to unnecessary overscoping. Now, this is the other side of the spectrum. I don't see much of it, but it does happen. And most of the time, I see underscoping, not overscoping, because overscoping leads to um, you know excessive spending, because then you have to implement your PCI DSS controls, which are very exhaustive on all the scope that you've identified. So that leads to unnecessary wastage of time, money, and hard to get resources. So going ahead, so there is some scoping confusion. Again, let us get the terminologies right. What do I mean by in scope? Now, in scope essentially means that every doesn't mean that every PCI DSS requirement applies to an in scope system. This is one thing. So when somebody says that this is your in scope, like this network or this application is in the scope of PCI DSS, it doesn't mean that all the PCI DSS requirements apply to it. It simply means that some parts of the PCI DSS as applicable would be applicable to the in-scope items. For example, requirements applicable for just system or function use. For example, there is a PCI DSS control which says that servers, or servers cannot have multiple roles, one role per server. Now that applies only to servers. It doesn't apply to human beings, or it doesn't apply to a networking device. Now, on the other side, requirements applied at network level rather than on every system. For example, segregation of networks. It says that networks needs to be segregated. Um, so in that case, or if you're saying that inbound connections should not be directly to the databases, it should be at the application level. That there should be no inbound connection. Now that is more at the system level or the network level than at the server level. And there could be controls to reduce the applicability of certain PCI DSS requirements. Again, um, this is a part of segmentation. We'll get into that. So in scope doesn't mean each and every PCI DSS control applies to all the in scope items. So what does out of scope means? It simply means those are untrusted networks, which is not the PCI DSS environment, and you cannot really trust them. You have to treat them as an outside network. So you, as a part of PCI DSS, no security evaluation or validation is required of those out of scope entities. So tomorrow, if any sort of compromise happens of your card data environment, it simply means that you have kept out of scope a system or a server or a device or a person or a process which should have been in scope as a part of it. So if I may summarize it, what it simply means is that any and all systems that is one processing, transmitting, or storing card data is a part of your scope. Secondly is that even those systems which have an impact on the security of the card data environment are a part of your scope. So that includes your antivirus, your Active Directory, your it could be even your wireless devices. All those things becomes a part of scope. So it's not just the servers or the networking devices through which card data travels. We'll get into this more in detail as we dig into what is meant by scoping. This is what it means. Um, if you see here, the focus is OR. So involves the identification of people, process, or technologies, PPT, that interact with card data or could have an impact on the security of the card data. So even your log monitoring devices, your CCTV, your biometric systems, your guard at the gate, all becomes a part of the scope. So systems that connect to CD, systems that provide segmentation, systems providing security to the card data environment, or system that could impact your card data environment security are a part of the scope. Even your third party vendors, that is. Understand. So what we typically do is that when we are starting the scoping, or after we are done with it, we identify a zone within the company, within physical, like a physical area within the company premises, which we call as a CDE, that's card data environment. And by default, anything and everything within those walls is considered as a part of the in scope. So, for example, if the entire building is your card data environment, so in that case, everything, assuming that you have noted it down likewise, anything and everything within that building becomes a part of the scope. And then the next thing is that all the systems that connect to a system in a CD are in scope, irrespective of the functionality or the reason they have connectivity. So in that case, if you have maybe an Active Directory server that is shared across the environments, they become a part of the scope. Maybe a common antivirus server, maybe a common mail server becomes a part of the PCI DSS scope. In a flat network, if you have not segmented, all the systems are in the scope. Even if a single system is storing, processing, or transmitting card data, if you don't have segmentation, if you're not identified the scope very clearly, any and all the systems becomes a part of the scope. We'll get into this. We'll go through some case study also. So by default, the question comes, how do I start my scoping exercise? Where do I start? It seems so exhaustive, seems so big. So pay attention, because remember, this will feed into your actual segmentation exercise. Where do I start? First thing, Remember, PCI DSS requirements apply to all system components included or connected in the card data environment. So it comprises mostly, not mostly, rather all of the people, process, and technology that store, process cardholder data, and it includes network devices, servers, computing devices, applications. So it's not just the servers, including the desktops. Everything becomes a part of the scope. We'll get into this more in detail. Now, these are a few examples. Now, PCI DSS requirements applies to all system components included in or connected to the card data environment. Look at these examples. System providing securities or segmentation that can impact the security of the CD. So, for example, it could be your card, your CCTV, your SIEM, your log management servers, even your transitory, your FTP servers becomes a part of it. So, including the FTP servers, which way you may say that okay, my client transfers the data to it, and I then take it off within 2 seconds. Even that becomes a part of it. Your virtualization hypervisors, your firewall switches, routers, everything becomes a part of it. Your web application database, mail proxy. Just make a note of these things. Of course, I'll be putting up the video so you can go through these examples more in detail. Um, your internet-based applications or any other devices that comes in contact or located within the CDE becomes a part of the scope. Now, it is very important that a good amount of time and thoroughly critical reviews are made on the scoping, and be aware of not scoping. It could be okay, that's my card processing system or my card printing. I've heard clients say that to me. Okay, I just need my card processing system to become a part of the scope. Firstly, remember, it's not your choice. This is how PCI works. The scope is not your choice. Any, and I repeat again, any and all systems that are storing, processing, or transmitting card data becomes a part of scope. Next is those systems that are providing security for the card data environment or the cardholder data, and those systems that can have an impact on the card holder data environment are included in the scope. So, for example, NTP, that is Network Time Protocol Server, that you will be using across enterprise, they have a significant impact on the information security within the enterprise of even your card data environment. They are not directly securing, but they have an impact on the security. They become a part of the scope. It can lead to critical and destructive hacks. And again, a data flow mapping exercise should identify all points of storage, processing, and transmission. Okay, this we've been through. It includes all the networking equipment that transmit cardholder data. Includes, again, you may say I'm repeating myself, but I've lost count of how many times I've had so extended discussions with the clients where they're simply not willing to accept. Oh, see, they may say that okay, we have a wireless within the enterprise, but that is located outside the cardholder data environment or their premises. But understand, if there is a laptop which is being used in your card data environment, and also when it goes outside of that premises or outside of the CDE, it connects to the wireless. Since that laptop is also connecting within the card data environment, and then it's going outside and connecting to the wireless, the wireless also becomes a part of the scope. So because any sort of compromise when he is in the untrusted network can impact the security within the premises also. Encrypted, encrypted cardholder data. So again, it's really silly when people say that okay, my card data is encrypted and it is stored at an offsite premises. Those Since it is encrypted, it's not a part of the scope. No, that is utter rubbish. No matter where it is, if it is encrypted, it is a part of scope. You may say that those what to say, the outside area, those people do not have access to the decryption codes, so then my requirements from PCI DSS becomes less, but that doesn't mean that nothing is applicable. Compliance scoping. So this is a summary of what is meant by the scoping. As you can see, the employees, the local servers, routers, switches, the POS devices, the store servers, the back office servers, employees, firewall, router, payment processes, everything becomes a part of the scope. That's where if you don't have your segmentation in place, everything becomes a part of your scope. Remember, they both feed into each other. Compliance and scope, including your policies and procedures. It could be the IVR systems. Now, this is one of the most neglected systems that I've seen. That is the IVR, where people have, like even banks and all, have a call-in facility wherein they log on to the system and they input your 4-digit code or whatever be the case, and then the super helpful uh, customer support executive comes online and says, okay, what is your card number? So he enters, he says the card number, she makes a note. Okay, nowadays many banks have stopped that, just ask for the last 4 digits. Now remember, if it is just the um, you know 6 plus 4, first 6 last 4, it doesn't become a part of the scope unless the entire PAN number is required, is asked for. It doesn't become a part of the scope. So they just ask for the last 4 digits, which means then that particular interaction is not a part of PCI DSS scope. But where systems, if you have any sort of a system where you're asking for the entire 16 digits or anything more than the first 6 and last 4, then it becomes a part of the scope. Your point of sale devices, your ERP systems. Now, you may say that's not the case, but I have still seen systems where the entire 16 digits gets printed on the counter file. Like you swipe your digit at the store, and that counter file that comes up contains your entire 16 digit. So in that case, the entire POS devices becomes a part of the scope, and that is first of all extremely risky. If you still have some devices doing that, you really need to look into it. So technology requirements, scope technology requirements. It could be two-factor for the segmentation, and the scoping becomes a part of the scope. Your two-factor authentication devices, your encryption devices, your log management servers, your file integrity monitors. Understand, you may say, so many times I've seen people in the misconception that my file integrity monitoring system cannot be a part of the system, cannot be a part of the scope because it is not storing card data. But understand, scope, again I'm repeating, is not just those systems that are storing, processing, and transmitting, but also those systems that is one, uh, directly providing information security controls to the environment, or are controls which could impact the information security of the card data environment. So look at this chart. Even your vulnerability scanners becomes a part of it. Your antivirus, anti-spyware, two-factor authentication, IDS, IPS sensors, everything becomes a part of the scope. If your shop or if your organization handles card data, it is, if it is not storing, processing, or transmitting, then PCI DSS requirements do not apply directly. But if you are again in an environment which is providing services which can impact the security, then it becomes a part of the scope. One of the key examples would be um, your IDCs, internet data centers, where they are um, providing SIM services. You may say that they have no insight into their card data, but understand they are providing um, uh, a service that impacts the security of your card data, so they become a part of the scope. So that's why I always suggest that if you're signing up with an IDC to provide to you any of these services, which could be antivirus, NTP, it could be your SIEM, so many services, or even OS management services, backup services, patch management services, vulnerability management services. Ensure that they are PCI compliant and their AOCs, attestation of compliance, mentions those services. Do not go for a service provider who says that they are PCI compliant you first need to check whether their AOC mentions those services. It could be that uh, he's PCI DSS attested only for providing SIM services, but not for providing OS management services. And if you are giving your OS management, that is operating systems management services, to your IDC team, and your systems are having card data, then it's a violation. Then then you will be paying for the getting your even your service provider certified. First things first. For okay, a quick show of hands. How many people have actually done an entire risk management exercise? A quick show of hands, please. Okay. I repeat my question. I don't know whether you've understood. It is how many people, how many of the attendees have been involved in a full-fledged risk management, information risk management exercise? Okay, that's interesting. Okay, so I see almost like 35% or like one third of the people have been through an entire risk management exercise. So you would understand when I say that when you're doing a risk management exercise, you need to first identify your asset listing. That's the first thing that you do. You don't identify your threats and vulnerabilities, you identify your assets that need to be protected. So when you're scoping, the first thing that you need to do is have an inventory of all the systems that store, process, or transmit cardholder data. So you need to have an Excel file, or listing it out, all the system name, what cardholder data is stored, why it is being stored, why it is being retained, and what is the protection mechanism. Now this is also required as a part of PCI DSS. So it will help you. It's not just going to be a bureaucratic thing. It will help you in your PCI DSS control, mitigation, and it will also help you as a part of the scoping. Rather, you can't do your scoping without having an inventory like this in place. Now, understand cardholder data. So, I so many times we hear that they say that people say companies say that okay, cardholder data only in the card data environment. But my question to you would be, how do you know that it is only there in the card data environment and not gone outside? So there could be known and unknown location on most networks, and card data can leak out from known as well as unknown. And that is where having a good inventory could be the good starting point to identify cardholder data. And you need to have a thorough search of all your systems. The underline would be all. By all, I mean not just your card data environment, even outside, to ensure that no data has leaked out. If it has, then you need to do a forensic check on how did that card data leave and whether you need to rescope your environment or change your processes of working. Now, storing of card data is absolutely not allowed. Even if it is protected by encryption or password protection. Again, this may not be a part of the scoping exercise, but I just thought let me share some knowledge with you. Even if it is protected by encryption, password protection, and obfuscation, masking, or anything else, you're simply not allowed. Only minor exceptions would be your issuers and issuing processors. Just for some verification, even some payment brands may have some additional requirement from issuers and issuing processors. So if you're a merchant, if you're a payment gateway, or if you're just helping out as a part of the BPOs, you cannot store card data. The track data, the max track data, you cannot store at all. You may have to store it to identify if there are any track misreads or network errors, encryption. If you're an issuer or being asked by the payment brand to do that, understand it is very, very important that you have procedures for which include as to why you're collecting and when till when are you retaining it, and ensuring that you are collecting only the minimum amount of data required to solve the problem. If not the entire max drive data, you need to store only some part of it and ensure that only storing some part of it. Now, storing any data in a secure location, do not retain more data than needed. Encrypt the data when stored or transmitted. Secure the data immediately when troubleshooting is completed, and ensure that there is a destruction exercise of your card data, that is disposal after usage is complete, and ensure that have some checks in place to ensure that the data cannot be retrieved once deleted or once the troubleshooting is completed. Now, where can it be stored? Many locations: database, flat files, log files, debug files, because when you're doing any sort of programming exercise or any sort of troubleshooting, data goes all over the place. POS systems are known to store track data. POS servers are known to store track data. Authorization servers are known to store track data. So if you're buying in any sort of a software or system in place, ensure that these points are taken care of. Now, coming back, your CVA, CVCID, CV2, whatever the data. Now, understand the card verification value or card verification code. This you again not allowed to, you're not supposed to be storing beyond authentication unless you're doing something like an SI. But again, in a SI, that is a standing instruction, you don't need to have a CVV code to be stored. That is something that you need to require to keep in mind. So if your organization is doing recurring card transactions like a monthly payment of bills or anything like that, you don't need, as per PCI processes, to store the CVVs. So how do you ensure that your systems are not just storing card data? You need to ensure that by searching. How do you? And if I'm your auditor, I'll ask you, how did you ensure that your card data is not there outside of your card data environment? And so your answer typically would be, you have searched, and now so you need to submit the search results. So you can do it using a plain Windows search also, and so you can do it using your plain Windows search. It makes your job easier. You can do a regular, expression search with for searching of this card data. You can use the mod 10 methodology for identifying whether it's a actual card data, a card number, or whether it is a part of some other number series in your documentation. So just one slide on what is mod 10. I'm sharing this with you. You cannot do this in a mental way. So you need to have some sort of a code written. If you search the net, you'll get many softwares for mod 10 calculations. You put in the number and it will tell you whether it's a valid card number or not. Now, understand, valid doesn't mean that it will be authenticated by your issuer. It simply means that it is following the norms of card numbering sequences. So have you seen sometimes that is you enter the first four digits and immediately the system shows you that it's a Visa, MasterCard or Amex or anything like that? That is because of the Mod 10 series. Or sometimes as soon as you enter the card number without even pressing submit, the system tells you that the card number is invalid. How does it do that? Because they run the Mod 10 algorithm. So the first thing, double the value of the alternate digits of the prime number. See, double uh, the number starting from the right, square it, square it, square it, square it. For any result greater than 10, subtract 9. So x2 of 9, 18 minus 9, so the number is 9. 5 twice is 10, minus 9 is 1, and you can see the multiplication happening. And whatever is there in the first three in the odd number sequences, you just copy it forward as is, and the total obtained from this step 2, that is step 2, the total obtained has to be divisible by 10. So if it is not divisible by 10, that is this entire outcome, if it is not divisible by 10, the number is wrong. So you can just take a minute to just go through the numbering, and if you have any questions, you can just pop me a question and I will answer it. As you must have seen, it is totaling to what? Almost, not almost, it's totaling to 60, which is divisible by 10. Okay, one question. Okay, okay, the gentleman Kiran, okay, is asking an interesting question. Are we supposed to be totaling up even the odd numbers? Yes, you have to. You just copy the odd numbers down as is, and you double the even numbers, the even digits starting from the right, and you put it down over here. And if it is more than 10, then you minus 9 from it. And whatever is left at this row that you can see 840898185, this entire series you add, divide by 10. If it is divisible, then it is a card number, a valid card number. Again, I'm saying a valid card number doesn't mean that it is an authorized card number which will even pass your authentication through the issuers. We even have cardholder data discovery tools. There is a vast array of commercial and freeware products. Even DLPs nowadays, data leakage prevention tools, are in a position to identify cardholder data. There are not many good freewares nowadays. There are many commercial products, and as a matter of fact, if I may share some internal organizational news from our side, we are also working on a cardholder data tool that we can provide at no extra cost to our clients. And since you are there as attending my webinar, we will soon give you a sneak peek at the tool also. Okay, it's not yet fully developed now, but when it's done, we'll send you the links for that, and you can then give us your very critical feedback on the working aspects of that. So I will always suggest use a cardholder data discovery tool. If you depend on Windows search to do that, it's going to be a very long and painful process. So always use a commercial cardholder data discovery tool. Okay, another question. Okay, gentleman is asking. Okay, then he's asking if I can recommend any free tools. Well, there is one tool by the Cornell University, and it's called a Spider. I'm not sure whether it is still available on the net. I'm sure that if you search for it, I found that to be pretty interesting, pretty good. Rudimentary, but gets the job done. I repeat, the tool's name is Spider. You can search for Spider cardholder data discovery tool. It is by Cornell University. You can search even on Cornell, cornell.edu. So I hope that helps. Thank you for your question, Albert. Thank you. Okay, questions to ask. So to reduce your scope, you need to ask this question: do I need to store the data, or do I need to store it? Then store it how long? Why do I need to store it? How many locations I need to store it? Whether you can even replace the word store with the process or transfer the data. So ask this question again: do I need to store the data? Do I need to process this data on this server? Do I need to transfer this data through this switch or this router? Can I not transfer it from here, or can I not store it here, or can I not process it on this server? Can you consolidate your scope in some way? Each server that you remove from the scope in a very practical manner reduces your footprint for being hacked, and reduces your cost of implementing PCI DSS. The scoping flowchart as a summary. So you start over here. You start, does the system store, process, or transmit cardholder data or sensitive authentication data? Yes, so it's a part of scope. No, then does it provide segmentation? Yes, then it's a part of scope. No, then is it segmented? It could not be. It may not be doing storing, processing, or transmitting, but is it segmented from the card data environment? If no, then a card data environment is contaminated and those systems becomes a part of the scope. If it is segmented, then you need to ask, does it provide security services to your card data environment? If it is a yes, then it's a part of scope as a connected security. Does it have controlled access? Yes, then it's a part of your scope. If it doesn't have even controlled access, then can it affect the security of the CDE? Yes, then it's a part of scope. Many a time, CCTV is something that we feel that we see left out because they say, okay, it's monitoring other areas also. Yes, but it's also monitoring those people entering and exiting your car data environment. So it becomes a part of scope. And if the answer to even that is no, then it is out of your scope. An interesting diagram that you can keep in mind. There are 3 levels of category devices. I'm repeating this again and again because this will be the major bone of contention when you are scoping your car data environments. Um, First, any sort of data, any sort of systems that falls in the red zone means it is storing, processing, or transmitting car data. It's a no-brainer. It's a part of scope. Then you will need to get into which devices are providing services or have controlled access to the CDE. They become a part of the scope. It could be people, process, or technology, not just technology. Remember that. And those systems which are not storing, processing, or transmitting and are totally isolated from the CD, those systems are not a part of the scope. Otherwise, red and yellow is a part of your scope. Now, this is going to be interesting. Network segmentation. Now, you've identified the scope. Now, you need to do the segmentation to ensure that your network, your systems do not become a flat network. So, anything and everything becomes a part of the scope. So, to avoid that, we do segmentation. Now, segmentation, let me share, is not a new concept. It was there even earlier when I used to design networks like back in the mid 90s and late 90s. I would always say when the networks, when they used to get connected to the networks, have a segmentation done. I used to call it a segregation of networks to ensure that high risk areas, especially systems in the DMZ, are segregated through a firewall, or systems are exposed to the internet are segregated by a firewall from systems that are not accessible from the internet. So again, in segmentation over here you do the same thing, but here the focus would be segregate your car data environment from your non-car data or your corporate network. Now, so that's where the requirement 1.2 comes from untrusted networks. So build a firewall configuration or delays all traffic from untrusted networks except for protocols necessary for cardholder data environment. So untrusted network, as you saw earlier, is outer scope networks and host. Time server, hardened to recommended levels. Understand, this could be a time server which is servicing your corporate VLAN and your card data VLAN. It is falling under requirement 10.4, so it becomes a part of the scope. Why do we do segmentation? Again, to reduce the scope. To reduce the cost, because smaller the scope, lesser the cost typically, and it is very costly and difficult. For you may get it done once, but maintaining a diligent PCI DSS environment is a very expensive affair, very painful affair, needs more people, more time, more money. So we always say segment it out so the scope and the cost gets controlled. And the risk of to the organization is also reduced because then your footprint is low. Lower the footprint, lower the risk. Again, as a repetition, without adequate network segmentation, also called as a flat network, the entire network is in scope of the PCI DSS assessment. Like we have done PCI DSS for banks, and I'll share this incident with you without naming anybody. So this bank The branches are there, and so they said, okay, card data environment, and they're issuing credit cards and stuff like that. And what used to happen is, um, some particular user at some branch, he would have some problem with his card. He would come to the branch to get his card checked out because maybe he's not able to use it, or maybe it got blocked. So he will take the card to the branch, and they will send him to the branch manager, because only the branch manager has access to that function. So he will take the card, he will enter it into the system, and he will see whether who that particular card number belongs to, and then unlock it. So I asked them why they're doing it. They are saying that we have so many branches, you can't expect the users to travel to the central head office to get their cards unlocked. But what would happen because of that? Because of the branch manager having access to the card data, but he is accessing it once in a month or something, whenever once in a while, whenever somebody has a problem. But it doesn't matter how often you're using it. The branch manager had access to the card data, and the bank said that no, it's only the branch manager who has access, and he is a very good fellow. It doesn't matter whether he's a good fellow, bad fellow, how educated or experienced a person is. Card can be accessed from that location. That location, that person becomes a part of the scope. Now, the branch had a flat network. So then the entire branch becomes a part of the scope. Hundreds of branches. Just imagine the cost of rolling out PCI DSS at hundreds of branches. So so that's where you need to ensure that segmentation is done. So let's move on. Okay, network segmentation. This is something. Network segmentation is not mandated. It's not a PCI DSS requirement. Segmentation is done to reduce the scope. But if you don't do segmentation, entire thing becomes a scope. So if you're a QSA, or if you are evaluating PCI DSS in your environment, you cannot say that PCI DSS is a definitive PCI DSS. Sorry, segmentation is a definitive PCI DSS requirement. It can be achieved through a number of physical and logical means. We'll get into that. Even the devices that isolates the card data environment could be used for segmentation. Any devices that isolates could be used for segmentation, and even the device then becomes a part of the scope. Okay, one sec. There's a question over here. Okay, this gentleman, Nick, has asked. He wants me to finish my illustration from the previous slide. That is. He's asking what was my recommendation to the branch. Okay, let me ask you, um, what would you suggest? Let me put this question to the team. What would you suggest? So this branch manager has access to the code, the card number. So what would you suggest to him? Quickly, I'm very much short of time. I've already, wow, we are late. So please help me out. Please finish. Please respond. So what would be your response to them? Your response to them. Okay, some said segregate the branch manager, but imagine hundreds of branches doing the segregation technologies. Okay, there is this Miss Soumya, interesting name. Okay, she's said something very nice. We can update the CBS, the core banking systems, to ensure that the entire 16 digits is not displayed. Only the first six, last four, or just the last four. That is done by most banks. So in that case, those branches don't become a part of scope. Okay, I need to just rush this along now. We are running short of time. You can zoom me your questions and I will answer you. So this is how the yes and no flowchart happens. You can go through it. Can scope be reduced? Yes. Did SSR validate effectiveness segmentation? No. Then the entire network is a part of scope if he has. SSR documents in report that network is segmented, and he has to put down the technologies that is used for the segmentation. Then the scope can be limited to only isolated areas. A couple of case studies. This is a no segmented network with no segmentation in at all, in which case all the workstations and wireless networks are in scope. Look at it this way. But now look at this. There is a PCI LAN, e-commerce servers, all segmented, and there is a gap in between which could be filled by a firewall. And look at this, there is a wireless which is servicing both the corporate and the PCI LAN. And look at that, even that is going through a firewall. So wireless networks is mandated, it has to go through the firewall. You may say that your laptops, that is, you may have some laptops over here who are connecting to the wireless, but you may say, oh no, they are not touching card data. Doesn't matter. If they are within the card data environment and they are connecting to the wireless, whether or not they are processing card data, the wireless has to become a part of the PCI scope. The wireless has to be, get segmented via a firewall. Look at this thing, a store that we see in the merchants. And this is what I was saying earlier, PCI DSS requirement. A firewall must be installed between wireless networks and card data environment. That's mandatory. And this is like a no segmented network, and this is a segmented network. The retail LAN, all systems processing are in scope, and these things are not in scope. But all systems with access to the CSD wireless, remember this: wireless network doesn't transmit cardholder data and cannot connect to the card data environment. Then it is out of the scope. So understand. So all the system storing, processing, or transmitting card data are in the scope. I'll just need to just zoom this along. We're running really short of time. I'm over short of time. The intent of segmentation is to prevent the out-of-scope systems from being able to communicate with the systems in the CDE. That is basic bottom line for segmentation. That is to ensure that out-of-scope systems are not able to communicate at all or have very controlled access to the CDE. A few popular misconceptions. No connectivity is allowed from the CDE into the CDE from outside. This is utter nonsense. It is silly. Uh, if that was true, just think about it. How do your internet banking customers connect to your internet banking servers and do your card transactions? They are connecting to the CDE from outside. But the point is, it's a very controlled access. All such those connectivity systems are in the scope and are secure and are monitored. So connectivity or access is allowed from CDE to systems from outside of the CDE, but it should be controlled. There should be firewalls, and there are some basic bottom lines in place. That is, those systems should not be in the position to connect directly to the database. It has to be via the application servers. Directly through the database is not allowed. Now, they may say, I've seen companies say that we have VLANs in place, so segmentation is there in place. That cannot be taken as for sure. You cannot say that since I have a VLAN, so therefore we have segmentation in place. You need to have some sort of a filtering process in place to ensure that just a segmentation is not enough. Filtering, monitoring has to be there in place to ensure that the segmentation is actually working. So this is, you can put a favorite word over there, that I have some weird technology that eliminates all PCI DSS requirements. Well, there are tools and technologies which may help reduce the risk and applicability of some PCI DSS requirements, and may even reduce the size of the card data environment, or help meet card data requirement more easily. But that doesn't mean that it's eliminated all PCI DSS requirements. There are so many controls that you can use. You can go through it at ease: host-based firewalls, intrusion detection systems, physical access controls, logical controls in place. So it is not just a firewall. Even when you put up a biometric system at your door to keep out unauthorized people from your CDE, you're actually doing a segmentation. Not using firewalls, but using other technologies. So look at that in place. and active monitoring is very, very important. You can't just have segmentation without monitoring. So if I'm your auditor, that's the next thing I'll be asking. How are you ensuring that these controls are diligently being used? Okay, so that brings me to the end of my webinar. I'm sorry, I just had to zoom through it because we are way over time. We are completed 8 so far. We are on the ninth. We are coming up to the ninth, which is there on the 25th of October. That is managing data leakage in your PCI environment. Again, that may feed into the scoping part. So many people think that I have a DLP in place and that's enough. So is that true? That is something that we'll be looking at. That's in the past. So coming up is that October 25th. Again, we'll be doing this across India, US, and UK. So please to continue showing us your encouragement and support, and I'll see you online. So thank you so much. At the end of this webinar, there will be a survey, and it's just like 2 or 3 points that we ask of you to help us improve. Please ensure, I request you to fill that up. To it could be criticism, it could be a simple word of great job, whatever, it's okay. And I look for it could be even some points that we have not covered. Send across your queries and I will answer you. These are my coordinates in case you wish to connect, and all our past webinars are there on our YouTube page. Do sign up, subscribe, share, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you so much and have a wonderful evening ahead. Take care. Bye bye.